Amending Act 1781, a supplement to the Regulating Act. The Regulating Act was enacted to regularize the working of the company and the government of the company in India. However, the British Parliament soon learned that the spirit of the Regulating Act did not materialize on the ground. There were some gaps in the provisions of the legislation. There were flaws in the rules laid by the legislation. The Parliament took time to correct the flaws. Ultimately, a Supplementary Act was passed in 1781. The Act of 1781 was a follow-up undertaken by the Parliament. An elucidation of the causes of the Supplementary Act of 1781 now follows. 1. The conflict between the court and the council. In the Kasijora Raja case of Raja Surendra Narayan vs Kashinath and Patna case, the court created much discontentment by exercising its judicial interpretation on a pedantic basis. The council and the Governor-General resisted the implementation of the order of the court. Raja Kasijora refused to surrender to the court, and the Governor-General provided protection to him. Hence, it was a judicial crisis that was watched by the Parliament with a lot of concern. 2. Indian-British inhabitants approached the British Parliament. The British inhabitants of Bengal petitioned the Parliament against the rigid interpretation by the court causing the disruption in trade. 3. The Court of Directors petitioned the Parliament against the Indian Supreme Court of Calcutta. The Court of Directors also petitioned the Parliament against the ruling of the court against the revenue officials working in Bengal. It had caused losses to the company. 4. Conduct of Justice MP questioned. There were reports against Justice MP that he had overstepped his limits in the case of the political field. There were accusations that he had earned money through corrupt means. Similar kind of reports were also registered against his assisting judges. 5. Response of the British Parliament on the issue of its credibility. Finally, the British Parliament constituted two committees, namely a Select Committee and a Secret Committee. Edmund Burke headed the Select Committee. He was popular as one of the best political theorists of his time. He was entrusted with framing the rules to be enshrined in the legislation to correct the shortcomings dealing with the working of the courts. The Secret Committee undertook an inquiry into the causes of the Second Mysore War. The Select Committee submitted its reports in 1781. Finally, an Amending Act for the Regulating Act was passed in 1781. It has the following features. Main features of the Amending Act of 1781. 1. The Governor-General and his council were exempted from the jurisdiction of the court for the acts of these officers performed in their official capacity. 2. The revenue collectors of the Bengal government were exempted from the jurisdiction of the court for the act of collection of the revenue. Similarly, farmers and landlords were also exempted from the jurisdiction of the Court of Calcutta. 3. The judicial officials of the country courts were also exempted from the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court of Calcutta for the acts performed in their official capacity. 4. The Sadar Diwani Adalat, which was constituted by the Governor-General and his council, was recognized. The appellate jurisdiction of the Sadar Diwani Adalat was recognized. The appeal against the Sadar Diwani Adalat was brought under the jurisdiction of His Majesty where the civil cases exceeded £5,000 in value. The Supreme Court of Calcutta was allowed to listen to the civil cases meant for the Sadar Diwani Adalat. 5. The Supreme Court was disallowed to listen to the cases of Indians employed by the company administration. Such cases could only be allowed to be entertained by the Supreme Court if the parties agreed. 6. In cases dealing with inheritance and contracts involving Hindus and Mohammedans, the Supreme Court of Calcutta would adjudicate based on the laws of the defendant. In such cases, the English laws would not be used. 7. The Governor-General in Council was empowered to frame rules for the provincial courts and councils. The provision of registering with and the sanction from the Supreme Court for the regulations framed by the Governor-General in Council was abolished. 8. The Act directed the Bengal administration to streamline the collection of revenue and to maintain law and order in the province. Concluding remark on the Amending Act of 1781. 1. The Act removed all those irritants which had caused embarrassment to the Parliament and disrupted the working of the government of Bengal. The Governor-General did not have to get sanction from the Supreme Court of Calcutta. This provision had created major crisis in the working of the administration. The Indian employees of the company, in case of civil suits, were brought out of the jurisdiction of the court. The laws to be adopted while deciding the cases were specified. The confusion about the selection of the set of laws of England and the local laws was removed. By such measures executed by the 1781 Act removed the defects of the Regulating Act. In this manner, it was a supplementary act. 2. The 1781 Act had some immediate effects. After all, it removed the defects of the Regulating Act. Secondly, the people who were imprisoned earlier by the court were released. It gave a relief to many people. 3. The Act also absolved all those who resisted the decrees passed against them by the Supreme Court of Calcutta. It ended the conflict between the court and the council, which had been created while both offices were performing their duty. 4. The Regulating Act of 1773 and the Supplementary Act of 1781 formed a single measure that the Parliament of Britain had adopted for good administration in India. It started a series of legislations that framed the history of India and the Anglo-Indian Constitution.